The Grand Council Chamber was the largest room in the known galaxy. It sat at the center of Station Prime, a massive structure that floated in the space between three solar systems. Every species that had reached the stars sent representatives here. For 10,000 years, this chamber had seen treaties signed, wars ended, and new civilizations welcomed into the galactic community. Today, the chamber was full. Over 300 species sat in their designated sections, each adapted to their own environmental needs. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some needed heat, others cold. The technology of the council made it possible for all of them to exist in the same room without dying. At the center of the chamber stood a single podium. Behind it, the massive symbol of the Galactic Council glowed with soft blue light. The symbol showed a spiral galaxy with hundreds of stars connected by thin lines. It represented unity. It represented peace. Ambassador of the Empire stood at the podium. He was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin that seemed to shift colors under the lights. His four eyes blinked in sequence as he looked around the chamber. They were one of the oldest species in the council. They had been traveling between stars when most other species were still living in caves. Cleared his throat. The sound echoed through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "Fellow members of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "I come before you today to speak of a matter that has weighed upon the conscience of my people for many cycles." The chamber was quiet. They rarely asked to speak before the full council. When they did, it was always important. 63 of your standard years ago, continued, my people made a decision. It was a decision made in fear, a decision made in haste, and now we believe it was a decision made in error. He paused. His four eyes moved across the chamber, looking at the representatives of species he had known for centuries. Friends, allies, trading partners. 63 years ago, the Empire discovered a new intelligent species. They were young, primitive. They had only recently learned to leave their own planet. They had not yet traveled beyond their single moon. In the back of the chamber, in a section that few had noticed, something stirred, but did not see it. He was focused on his confession. "We observed this species for some time. What we saw concerned us." Skin shifted to a darker shade of gray. Among his people, this was a sign of discomfort. This species was violent, incredibly violent. They fought wars against each other constantly. They had weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They had poisons that could kill millions, and they seemed eager to use them against their own kind. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Many species remembered their own violent pasts, but few had been as violent as what was describing. "Our scientists studied them," said. "They made projections. They calculated how quickly this species might develop, how soon they might reach the stars, and what they might do when they got there." He took a deep breath. The projections were terrifying. This species bred quickly. They adapted quickly. They learned quickly. Our scientists said that within 200 years they would have technology equal to ours. Within 500 years they might surpass us, and given their violent nature. Let the sentence hang in the air. The high command of the Empire made a decision that was never reported to this council, a decision that violated our most sacred laws. The chamber was completely silent now. Every eye, every sensor, every attention organ was focused on. "We attacked them." The word seemed to echo forever. "We sent a fleet of 100 warships to their system. We bombarded their planet from orbit. We targeted their military installations, their industrial centers, their centers of population. We killed, we estimated, 4 billion of them, perhaps more." Somewhere in the chamber, someone made a sound of horror, but most remained silent, too shocked to speak. "We believed we were protecting the galaxy," said. "We believed that this species, if allowed to grow, would bring war and destruction to everyone. We believed that it was better to eliminate them while they were still weak than to face them when they were strong. He looked down at the podium. We believed that we had succeeded. The lights in the chamber flickered. Several representatives looked around nervously. For 60 years, we told ourselves that we had made the right choice, the hard choice, the necessary choice. We mourned the lives we had taken, but we believed that we had saved many more. Looked up again. His 4 eyes were wet with what might have been tears. But recently, we learned that we were wrong. Not wrong in our assessment of this species. They are everything we feared and more. No, we were wrong in believing that we had destroyed them. A cold feeling spread through the chamber. Something was wrong. Everyone could feel it. This species did not die, they survived. And in 63 years they have done exactly what our scientists predicted. They have advanced. They have grown. They have reached the stars. His voice was shaking now. And they remember. The lights flickered again. This time they went out completely. In the darkness, a new light appeared. It came from the back of the chamber, from the section that few had noticed. When the lights came back on, everyone turned to look. A human was standing there. He was not tall, not by the standards of many species. He wore a simple black uniform with no decorations. His hair was gray, his face was lined with age, and his eyes were cold and hard. He walked down the aisle toward the center of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the silence. No one moved, no one spoke. When he reached the podium, stepped back, the human did not look at him. He looked out at the assembled representatives of 300 species. "My name," he said, his voice calm and quiet, "is Admiral of the United Earth Defense Force." He smiled. It was not a kind smile. "And I have been waiting for this moment for a very long time." The silence in the Grand Council chamber was unlike anything that had been heard in 10,000 years of meetings. 300 species, thousands of representatives, and not one of them made a sound. They barely breathed. Admiral stood at the podium like he owned it, like he had always stood there, like he belonged there more than anyone else in the room. Had retreated several steps back. His skin had turned almost white, a sign of extreme fear among the. His 4 eyes were wide and his hands trembled at his sides. 63 years ago, Admiral began, I was 7 years old. I lived in a city called Shanghai. It was one of the largest cities on Earth. 24 million people lived there. He paused. I was at school when your ships came. My teacher was showing us pictures of the stars. She was telling us about how one day humans might travel to other planets. She was excited. We were all excited. His voice remained calm, almost too calm. Then the sky turned red, the ground shook. The building collapsed around us. I was buried under concrete and steel for 3 days before anyone found me. By then my teacher was dead. Most of my classmates were dead. When they pulled me out, I looked up and saw that my city was gone. Everything was burning. Everything was ash. In the chamber, several representatives shifted uncomfortably. They had never heard a human speak before. They had only seen reports, statistics, numbers. 4 billion dead, the reports said, just a number, easy to ignore. I spent the next week walking through the ruins, Admiral continued. I was looking for my family, my parents, my little sister. I never found them. I found their apartment building, though. It was a pile of rubble and bones. He looked directly at. I was 7 years old, and I learned what it meant to hate. Opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. You thought you killed us, Admiral said. You were wrong. You killed 4 billion of us, but 8 billion survived, and every single one of them learned to hate on that day. He turned back to the council. Let me tell you what happened next. Let me tell you what humans do when they are attacked. He pressed a button on the podium. A holographic display appeared above the chamber showing Earth. It was blue and green and white, beautiful even now. For the first year we buried our dead. We counted our losses. We tried to understand what had happened. Your ships left no survivors for us to capture. They left no messages. They just came, they killed, and they left. We did not know who you were. We did not know why you attacked. All we knew was that someone out there wanted us dead. The image changed to show humans working, building, creating. So we decided that we would not be helpless again. We took every resource we had, every scientist, every engineer, every factory, and we focused on one goal: survival. The image showed ships being built, weapons being tested. In 5 years, we had our first warships. They were crude, simple, probably nothing compared to what they had, but they were ours, and we built more and more and more. The image changed again. Now it showed a fleet, hundreds of ships, then thousands. In 10 years, we reached our closest neighbor star. We found a planet there. It was not perfect for us, but we made it work. We always make things work. Another image, another fleet, bigger this time. In 20 years, we had colonized 12 worlds. Our population was growing again. Our technology was advancing. And we never stopped building ships. We never stopped preparing. The representatives in the chamber were beginning to understand. Some of them were already calculating. Some of them were already afraid. In 30 years, we found you. The image changed to show a ship. It was floating in space, damaged but intact. One of your patrol vessels got too close to our territory. We captured it. We learned your language. We read your records. And we finally understood who had attacked us and why. Admiral's smile was cold. Your scientists were right about us. We do learn quickly. We took your technology and we improved it. We took your weapons and we made them better. We took everything you knew and we built upon it. The image changed again. This time it showed the current Earth Defense Fleet. It was vast, enormous. It stretched across the screen like a wall of steel and fire. Today, the United Earth Defense Force has 47,000 warships. We have colonized 261 worlds. Our population is 29 billion. And every single ship, every single colony, every single person has one purpose: to make sure that what happened to Earth never happens again. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted, some screamed, many tried to run, but the doors were sealed. Admiral waited for the noise to die down. It took several minutes. "Please," he said, "remain calm. I have not come here to start a war, not today." The noise stopped. Hope flickered in many eyes. "You see, we learned something else from the records. We learned that they never told you about their attack. We learned that this council, this body that claims to represent all intelligent life in the galaxy, knew nothing about what was done to us." He looked around the chamber slowly. "We also learned that they violated your laws. They attacked an intelligent species without provocation. They attempted genocide without council approval. They hid their crimes for 60 years. Admiral turned to face directly. "Ambassador, you came here today to confess, to ask for forgiveness. Perhaps you thought that by admitting your guilt, you could avoid consequences. Perhaps you thought that we would appreciate your honesty." Could not speak, he could barely stand. "I do appreciate it," Admiral said. "Your confession has been recorded, every word, every admission of guilt. It will be very useful." He turned back to the council. "Humanity does not ask this council for justice. We have learned not to depend on others for that. But we do ask this council to recognize the truth. The Empire committed an unprovoked attack against humanity. They killed 4 billion of our people, and they hid it from you." He paused. "We also ask this council to answer one simple question." The chamber was silent again. Everyone was waiting. "What are you going to do about it?" The question hung in the air of the Grand Council chamber like poison gas. 300 species sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had heard. They had attacked humanity. Humanity had survived. And now humanity wanted to know what the council would do. High Chancellor of the collective was the first to recover. They were an old species, nearly as old as the. They had seen much in their long history, but even had never seen anything like this. She rose from her seat, her body clicking softly as she moved. Her wings were folded tight against her back. Her compound eyes reflected the lights of the chamber in thousands of tiny sparkles. "Admiral," she said, her voice translated through the chamber's systems. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I must first express our deepest sorrow for what was done to your people. The attack was a crime, a terrible crime, and we are shamed that it was committed by one of our member species." Admiral nodded but said nothing. "However," continued, "I must also ask for your patience. This matter is complicated. They are founding members of this council. They have been part of our community for 10,000 years. There are treaties, agreements, laws that must be followed." "Laws," Admiral repeated. "Yes, I am familiar with your laws. We studied them carefully." He pressed another button on the podium. The holographic display changed to show text, pages and pages of text. Article 17 of the Galactic Charter. No member species shall attack, invade, or make war upon any intelligent species without approval from the full Council. Violation of this article shall result in immediate suspension from the Council, economic sanctions, and military intervention if necessary. The text zoomed in on specific passages. Article 23. Acts of genocide, defined as the deliberate destruction of more than 10% of an intelligent species, shall be considered the highest crime in galactic law. Perpetrators shall face judgment before the full Council and may be subject to the most severe penalties available. Admiral looked at. They killed nearly 50% of humanity. They did so without Council approval. They did so in secret. They have violated your laws in ways that should have triggered automatic responses decades ago. His wings twitched. It was a sign of distress among her species. "You are correct," she admitted. "The laws are clear, but they have never been tested in this way. They are powerful. They have allies. If we move against them too quickly, there could be war." "There could be war," Admiral agreed. "Yes, I understand your concern." He smiled that cold smile again. "Let me help you understand something about humanity. We have had many wars, wars against ourselves, wars against each other. We have, as the correctly noted, a talent for violence. But we also have a talent that your species seem to lack." He paused. "We have patience." The word seemed to confuse many of the representatives. Patience was not what they expected from a species described as violent and aggressive. "For 63 years we have been patient," Admiral continued. "We could have attacked the moment we learned who they were. We had enough ships by then, enough weapons, enough hate. But we waited. Do you know why?" No one answered. "Because we wanted to understand. We wanted to know everything about this galaxy before we made any decisions. We wanted to know who our enemies were, who our potential friends might be. We wanted to know the rules of the game before we started playing." He gestured at the chamber. "We have been watching you, all of you, for 30 years. We have listened to your communications. We have studied your cultures. We have learned your histories, and we have been very, very careful." A representative from a species called the stood up. They were known for their intelligence and their neutrality. They had never fought a war in their entire history. "Admiral," they said, "you say that humanity has been watching us. Does this mean you have been preparing for war against us all?" "We have been preparing for anything," Admiral replied. "But we have also been learning, and what we learned surprised us." He looked around the chamber. "We expected to find a galaxy full of enemies, species that approved of the attack on Earth, species that would finish what they started if they had the chance. But that is not what we found." The representatives leaned forward. They wanted to understand. "We found a galaxy full of species that are trying to live in peace, species that follow your laws because they believe in them, not because they are forced to. Species that would be horrified by what they did if they knew the truth. Admiral's expression softened slightly. We also found species that have been victims themselves, species that were attacked, exploited, or oppressed by more powerful neighbors, species that understand what it means to suffer, species that might understand us. In a section near the back of the chamber, several representatives from smaller species began to nod. They knew what it meant to be weak, to be afraid, to be at the mercy of those with more power. Humanity does not want war, Admiral said. War is what was done to us. We want something else. We want justice, and we want a place in this community. High Chancellor stepped forward. You say you want justice. What does that mean to you? What does humanity demand? Admiral considered the question. We demand three things. First, they must acknowledge their crime publicly. Not just here in this chamber, but to the entire galaxy. Every species must know what they did. Who had been standing frozen this entire time, finally found his voice. That is acceptable, he said weakly. We came here today to confess. We will confess to everyone. Second, Admiral continued, they must pay reparations. Not to us, but to the development fund that supports younger species. The amount will be calculated based on the damage done to Earth. It will be substantial. This caused some murmuring among the representatives. Reparations of that size could cripple the economy for generations. And third, Admiral said, we demand the right to join this council, not as observers, not as second-class members, as full participants with the same rights and privileges as any other species. The chamber erupted again. This time the noise was different. It was not fear or anger. It was debate, discussion. Representatives were talking to each other, arguing, considering. Raised her hand for silence. Admiral, your first two demands are within the power of this council to grant. But the third, membership in the council, requires approval from 2/3 of all member species. It is not something that can be given overnight. Admiral nodded. I understand. We do not expect an immediate answer, but we do expect a fair process, and we expect to be treated with respect. He looked around the chamber one more time. Humanity has shown patience for 63 years. We can show patience a little longer, but our patience is not infinite. And if this council chooses to protect the guilty instead of welcoming the victims. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Then we will find another way. The days following Admiral's appearance at the council were the most chaotic in galactic history. Communication channels were overwhelmed with messages. News spread across 10,000 worlds in hours. Everyone was talking about the same thing. The humans were real, they were powerful, and they wanted justice. The Empire went into crisis. Ambassador returned home to face the High Command, who were furious that he had confessed without consulting them first. But the damage was done. The confession had been recorded, broadcast, and shared across the galaxy. There was no taking it back. On Station Prime, the Council met in emergency session after emergency session. They debated, argued, and struggled to find a solution that would satisfy everyone. It was not easy. They had friends. They had trading partners. They had species that owed them favors. Not everyone wanted to see them punished. But they also had enemies, species that remembered old insults, species that had been pushed around by power for centuries. These species saw an opportunity. They supported humanity's demands with enthusiasm. Admiral remained on Station Prime throughout the debates. He did not interfere. He did not threaten. He simply waited as he had said he would, patient, calm, cold. But humanity was not idle during this time. Far from it. In orbit around Station Prime, where there had been empty space just days before, human ships began to appear. They came through jump points that no one had known existed. They came in numbers that made the Council's collective military look like a children's toy collection. First there were dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. The ships did not move aggressively. They did not power weapons. They simply took positions around the station and waited, a silent reminder of what humanity could do if it chose. The message was clear: we are asking nicely, for now. On the 37th day after the confession, the council finally reached a decision. The vote was close, but the outcome was what humanity had demanded. The Empire was found guilty of violating Articles 17 and 23 of the Galactic Charter. They were required to broadcast a full confession to every inhabited world in the galaxy. They were required to pay reparations equal to 10% of their gross domestic product for the next 100 years, and they were suspended from the Council for the same period. It was the harshest punishment ever given to a member species in the history of the Council, and it was still less than what many felt they deserved. The vote on humanity's membership was scheduled for 1 month later. In that time, human diplomats traveled to every major species in the Council. They brought gifts, they brought trade proposals, they brought offers of friendship, and they brought reminders. We could have chosen revenge, the diplomats said. We could have attacked the moment we found them. We had the power, we had the reason, but we chose peace instead. We chose to trust in your laws. We chose to give you a chance to do the right thing. Many species were moved by this message. They had expected humans to be monsters, savage creatures driven only by violence and hate. Instead, they found something else, something that confused them and intrigued them in equal measure. Humans, they discovered, were complicated. Yes, they were capable of terrible violence. Their history proved that, but they were also capable of remarkable kindness. They helped strangers in need. They risked their lives for people they had never met. They felt guilt for their mistakes and tried to make things better. They were, in other words, very much like everyone else, just more so. On the day of the membership vote, the Grand Council chamber was more crowded than it had ever been. Every species had sent their most important representatives. The galleries were packed with observers. Billions of beings across the galaxy watched the live broadcast. Admiral was there, of course, but this time he was not alone. Beside him stood hundreds of human representatives, scientists, artists, teachers, farmers, children. They came from every nation on Earth and every colony in human space. They came to show the galaxy who humanity really was. High Chancellor presided over the vote. She stood at the podium where had confessed, where Admiral had delivered his demands, and she looked out at the assembled multitudes. Today, she said, we vote on whether to welcome humanity into the Galactic Council. This is not just a vote about rules and procedures. It is a vote about who we are, what we believe, what kind of galaxy we want to live in. She paused. 63 years ago, a member of this council committed a terrible crime. They attacked a young species. They killed billions. They tried to destroy an entire civilization, and they did it in our name, in the name of galactic peace, in the name of protection from future threats. Her compound eyes swept across the chamber. We did not know about this crime. We did not approve it, but it was done by one of us, and that means we share in the responsibility, not for the attack itself, but for how we respond to it. She turned to look at the human delegation. Humanity could have responded to the attack with more violence. They could have become the monsters that they feared. Instead, they built a civilization. They expanded into space. They learned and grew and changed. And when they finally found us, they did not attack. They came to us with demands, yes, but they also came with an offer of peace, an offer of partnership, an offer to move forward together. She turned back to the council. I believe that we should accept this offer, not because we fear humanity's power, although their power is great, not because we feel guilty for what was done to them, although we should feel guilt, but because they have earned their place among us. They have shown that they deserve to be here. She stepped back. The vote will now begin. One by one, The species of the Galactic Council cast their votes. The holographic display above the chamber showed the count in real time. Green for yes, red for no. Each vote was accompanied by a brief statement from the representative. The collective votes yes. We welcome humanity as friends and partners. The assembly votes yes. We recognize humanity's right to join this community. The Federation votes yes. We look forward to learning from humanity and teaching them in return. Species after species voted yes, but not all of them. The Empire votes no. This species is a threat to galactic peace. The chamber fell silent when spoke. He was still the ambassador, still entitled to vote despite his people's suspension from the council, and he used that vote to oppose humanity one last time. But it did not matter. When the final count was done, humanity had received approval from 87% of the council, far more than the two-thirds required. The humans were in. 10 years passed after humanity joined the Galactic Council. They were years of change, growth, and cautious hope. Human ships traveled to distant worlds, carrying traders, scientists, and explorers. Human colonies expanded, but always within the limits set by galactic law. Human technology, that strange mix of borrowed ideas and brilliant innovation, spread across the stars. And everywhere they went, humans surprised people. A colony was struck by a terrible plague. Their doctors could not find a cure. They were preparing for mass death when human medical ships arrived. The humans had dealt with similar diseases on their own worlds. They brought treatments, supplies, and volunteers who worked without rest until the plague was contained. When it was over, they asked what payment humanity wanted. The humans said they wanted nothing. They had helped because it was the right thing to do. A research station discovered a new form of energy that could change everything. But the discovery was dangerous. It could be used to make weapons of incredible power. They were afraid of what might happen if the knowledge spread. They went to the council, uncertain what to do. The humans suggested a solution: share the research freely with everyone, so no single species could use it as a weapon against others. The idea was radical, but it worked. The new energy became a gift to the entire galaxy. A group of young species, newly spacefaring and vulnerable, formed an alliance for protection. They invited humanity to join them as advisors. The humans accepted, but they did not try to dominate the alliance. Instead, they taught the younger species how to defend themselves, how to negotiate, how to stand on their own. Within a decade, the alliance became one of the most stable political bodies in the galaxy. These stories and hundreds like them changed how the galaxy saw humanity. The fear remained, buried deep beneath the surface. Everyone remembered Admiral's cold eyes, his thousands of ships, his quiet threats. But alongside the fear, something else grew: respect, admiration, even affection. Humans were still violent. Their history had not changed, but they used their violence carefully now, and usually in defense of others. Pirate fleets that preyed on trade routes learned to avoid human convoys. Criminal organizations that operated across multiple systems found themselves hunted by human investigators. Species that threatened their neighbors discovered that humanity took a dim view of aggression. It was not perfect. Humans made mistakes. Sometimes they were too aggressive, too quick to fight when diplomacy might have worked better. Sometimes they were too stubborn, refusing to compromise on matters of principle. But they learned from their mistakes. They listened to criticism. They tried to do better. The meanwhile struggled with their punishment. The reparations were crushing. Their economy shrank year after year. Their influence in galactic affairs dwindled to almost nothing. Many of their former allies abandoned them. Some blamed humanity for everything. They nursed their hatred in secret, waiting for a chance at revenge. But most of them, especially the younger generations, began to see things differently. They looked at what their ancestors had done and felt shame. They looked at what humanity had become and felt something like hope. In the 50th year after the attack on Earth, something remarkable happened. A delegation of young traveled to Earth. They came without weapons, without guards, without official status. They came as private citizens, driven by conscience rather than duty. They stood in the ruins of old Shanghai, which had been preserved as a memorial. They looked at the monuments, the names of the dead, the images of destruction, and they wept. "We are sorry," they said. "Our ancestors did this, our people did this. We cannot undo it, but we want you to know that we are sorry." The humans who received them did not turn them away. They did not shout or curse or demand more punishment. Instead, they did something that surprised everyone who watched. They forgave. Not completely, not all at once. The wound was too deep for that, but they began the process. They opened a door that had been closed for 50 years. They allowed the possibility of something other than hate. Admiral was there that day. He was old now, his hair white, his face more lined than ever. He had spent his entire adult life preparing for war against but when the young knelt before him and begged for forgiveness, he did not refuse. "I hated your people," he said quietly. "I hated them more than I thought it was possible to hate anything. For 60 years that hate drove me. It made me strong. It gave me purpose." He looked at the memorial, at the names of 4 billion dead. "But hate is a heavy thing to carry, and I am tired." He reached down and helped the young to their feet. "I will not forget what was done. I cannot forget. But I can choose what to do with my memory. I can use it to build walls, or I can use it to build bridges." He looked into the eyes of beings whose ancestors had killed his family. "I choose bridges." The news of this meeting spread across the galaxy even faster than the news of the confession had spread 50 years before. Commentators analyzed it endlessly. Philosophers debated its meaning. Some called it weakness. Others called it the bravest thing they had ever seen. But for most beings, it was simply a reminder of what they had learned about humanity over the past decades. Humans were violent, yes. They were stubborn, yes. They held grudges for generations, yes. But they were also capable of growth, of change, of forgiveness. They were, in the end, exactly what they had feared, a species that could do anything. The mistake was assuming that anything meant only destruction. Humans could destroy, certainly. They were very good at it, but they could also create, protect, teach, heal, and yes, forgive. The galaxy was not a safe place before humans arrived. It had wars, crimes, tragedies, and injustice. But after humanity joined the Council, things slowly began to change. The laws were enforced more strictly. The weak were protected more effectively. The powerful were held accountable more often. Not because humanity forced these changes through violence, but because humanity showed everyone what was possible. They showed that a species born in violence could choose peace, that a species burned by hate could choose love, that a species given every reason for revenge could choose justice instead. In the end, they had been right about one thing: humanity was dangerous. But they had been wrong about what made humans dangerous. It was not their violence, it was their hope.